So the US finally took military action against Iran and bombed three nuclear sites. As you can see here, the US enters war between Israel and Iran, and they took out three sites with the B-2 bombers. It says including Fordo, which is the most widely watched nuclear site in Iran. And this news has pretty much been expected throughout the entire week last week. I think markets were on edge, which is why it didn't really go anywhere. They couldn't really find any buyers. Like I mentioned last video, before this issue was resolved, and finally it happened over the weekend. Trump, I remember last week, gave a 2-week notice to Iran. If there's no agreement reached between Iran and the US, then the US will enter the war. And finally, they did. And so now, what the markets are watching is whether or not Iran, like, how will Iran respond to US destroying three of its nuclear sites? And there's some speculation on X saying that maybe they're not completely destroyed and maybe Iran has moved much of its enriched uranium to other sites, but that's all speculation, right? And this morning we got a message from Donald Trump. It says, "We have successfully completed an attack on Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan, and they were all dropped. A full payload of bombs was dropped on primary site Fordo, and he's now calling for peace." So let's see how Iran is going to respond, and I don't think that this would escalate into a bigger world war. Previously, we had, on X, there was a bunch of information about U.S. Air Force B-2 stealth bombers leaving the U.S. to other sites and, military equipment moving from the U.S. to other areas in the Middle East. So the U.S. was definitely, preparing for a strike, if not a war. But we're going to have to see how all that plays out. And interestingly enough, and last night I've been monitoring the movement of cryptocurrencies because usually, Bitcoin and other currencies will give us a heads up whether or not this is going to be a start of a bigger downturn for stocks. And so we see that it's been slowly declining, and then finally we got the news released, and then Bitcoin dropped even more. So, people were moving, people were selling Bitcoin ahead of the strikes. But as you can see, it recovered pretty nicely, and we're still above 100K Bitcoin. So, if we were to see a bigger drop in the stock market, I would like to see Bitcoin move below 100K, but so far we're holding up. And as you can see, I don't really follow this, but US weekend markets, they're dropping about 300 points. At one point, it was down like 400 points. And so the biggest way Iran could respond to the US is to close the Strait of Hormuz, right? Which is arguably like I think they're responsible for 30% of the world's oil imports go through that strait. So it would affect oil markets badly. Iran could, respond economically. They can do economic harm to the United States. I think that's one way to do it, but we're gonna see how all this plays out. I don't think that, this is going to escalate into a bigger conflict. At least that's not what it shows to me on Bitcoin. Bitcoin isn't moving down much. It's only down about 0.97% for today. So if this were to be a bigger conflict, I would assume that Bitcoin would be down much, much more. And going back to the fear and greed index from last week, it moved off of greed, which is a good sign. It gives us more ammo for the bulls to move to greed and extreme greed before all this is said and done. And if you look at the monthly time frame, I find this quite interesting because we're about to close June with like some sort of doji candle. And this is good because next month we can then build on top of that and get a big, big green candle. And if you notice that we're still holding above this 9 exponential moving average on the monthly time frame. We got this big hammer candle and then we're moving right above it again. So the uptrend is still intact. And I think one of the reasons why June is probably flat is because if you look at the MACD remains bearish on the monthly time frame. So I would like to see this monthly move back up into positive territory and get a big green candle for July and August, moving into all-time highs. And same thing on the SPX weekly time frame. You can see that the MACD just turned bullish. I mean, we just got that bullish cross in April. April and May. So I'm looking for continuation for the overall markets to the upside. We got two indecision candles, two red weekly candles for the week. So we could definitely still, if Iran wants to retaliate and this explodes into a bigger issue, I think we could definitely tag the nine weekly moving average, exponential moving, nine exponential weekly moving average, which is sitting around 50, 585, 580, I believe, and get a bigger thrust to the upside. But so far, markets are holding really strong. Like I mentioned 2 videos ago, I was expecting more follow through for last week, but we didn't get that big of a red candle. So, and a lot of people were arguing that we're probably going to get a fourth wave or a bigger pullback. But as you can see so far, right, on the SPX daily time frame, if this were to be start of a one, a two, and then all this is three, and we're getting a four now, you see the four should at least touch the 23.6% retracement, which is at 577. Like we're not getting that, we're not anywhere near that at this point of time. So I believe that we're not even finished with three yet. So unless we get three and then a bigger pullback for four, then I would have to argue that we're still in a third wave and that the path of least resistance is to the upside. Hope you guys enjoyed this short little video. I just want to point out that I made a Discord and you guys can join for free. The link is in the description below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.